Hey now, say now. You know who it is and what it is. It is yours truly, the miraculously manifested mystical mouthpiece himself, KM for the record. Nationally recognized and locally accepted. And I am here live and direct with you brothers and sisters today. And I want to talk to y'all today about Rosicrucianism and Freemasonry and how these two organizations came together to form what I practice, which is mystic Freemasonry. Okay, so basically, Rosicrucianism can be dated in its earliest practices clearly the 1300s. When you're talking about the development of Freemasonry and its colleges of information, Rosicrucianism, people like John Dee and Francis Bacon were very implemental in that development due to the fact that they were French occultists and they came alongside of Freemasons, okay, during the development of America. So when we know that the structure of what we know today as modern Freemasonry started officially in the year 1717 with the Grand Lodge of England. Now, mind you, Rosicrucians were already in order at that time. There were already written manifestos, interpretations of sacred science and literature at that time, before the development and foundation of what we know today as modern Freemasonry. Now, what you get into today is a modern form of Rosicrucianism, which has nothing to do a lot with what we know to be Freemasonry. So when you look at the ancient Rosicrucian order and the modern Rosicrucian order that we have today, which they have a museum in California, they also have a park in Philadelphia. Dr. Pasquale Beverly Randolph is responsible for establishing the oldest Rosicrucian order here in America, and bringing sex magic to the shores of North America, as well as a plethora of other occultic perspectives. Dr. Strange is a character after the likeness of Dr. Pasquale Beverly Randolph, who was a black occultist doctor and Rosicrucian. And the thing about Rosicrucianism is this: each student or each adept, right, put it like that, has the ability to transcribe or transmit their own manifestos. And in transmitting these manifestos and transcribing these divine words and messages from whatever higher dimensional beings they may have come from, these type of things are what they would define as divine interpretation. Now, in Rosicrucianism, the manifestos and a lot of the documents or lectures that people would read are by members of the Rosicrucian order who have applied sciences and they are recording their experiences, okay? So it's slightly different because in order to even teach the majority of that which is learned in Rosicrucianism, you yourself have to know it proficiently before you can even teach it. So that idea of memorization and proficiency in literature and arts, these things come from an older order structure called Rosicrucianism, which is primarily the development of what we know today as modern day occultism. When you look at Aleister Crowley, when you look at the OTO, when you look at Madame Helen Blavatsky, and you look at the Theosophy Society, when you look at Dr. Malachi York and you look at the Nuwabians, when you look at Noble Drew Ali and you look at the Moorish Science Temple, when you look at Elijah Muhammad and you look at the Nation of Islam, when you look at a plethora of different body structures that have, in a way, deified or demigod a human and made their interpretation of what light is considered to be knowledge, right? They have taken their interpretation and they have ran with it, just like in the Church of Scientology. All of these things are not new. They weren't new to Ron L. Hubbard. They weren't new to Dr. Malachi Z. York. They weren't new to Dr. Pascal Beverly Randolph. They weren't new to Aleister Crowley. They weren't new to Madame Helen Blavatsky. They weren't new to Albert Pike. None of these things were new. Anyone who's ever studied Rosicrucianism knows that one of the stipulations of Rosicrucianism is to develop a divine understanding of the all. Once you come into the divine understanding of the all, you are relieved of your prejudices and ignorances of that which you do not know. So when you get to that 18th degree in Freemasonry on that Scottish Rite side, right, you as the individual who are on that journey are about to embark on a degree of information that will shatter the dogma that you have been taught your entire life. And it will make you question some of the spiritual content that you've been taught. And it will also offend you when you read some of this stuff, especially if you're coming from a very religiously trained mindset. So for instance, the modern day Islamic Council of sheikhs and ulemas and different people like that, they have come to this consensus that Freemasonry is not good. You know, it is haram for a Muslim who is claiming, right, to be a Muslim, that he is being a kafir if he practices Freemasonry, because Freemasonry introduces the Muslim mind to too much information about other gods. Freemasonry introduces the Muslim mind to too much information about the oneness of God through the expressions of other principles or descriptive deity descriptions of the one creator. Now, we know once we get into what I practice, I knew once I got, because we only have 9 degrees. Because again, we are a blue house, Freemason blue house, and then we have the non-Rosicrucian degrees, okay? Now, the non-Rosicrucian degrees that we have are just like having a Scottish Rite. And you know how you have a Supreme Council of 9? We have that in Mystic Freemasonry. The same name, same title, probably same function. I'm not a Supreme Council of 9, but I don't know. But I know what my elders do. And the same name, same function, same pretty much operations and stuff, but we do things from a more esoteric, mystic level. And our lodge and Grand Lodge is 100% esoteric. So although we do study proficient degree ritual work and catechisms and dogmas and etc., we come in with the open mind that we do not know, because we are seeking a certain amount of information that is going to expand our minds to this degree of removing the blinders of prejudice and ignorance for what other people may perceive and have conceived as the creator. Okay? So whenever we hang a tapestry up in a form of wisdom, we know wisdom is going to be dropped. Whenever we hang a tapestry up in the form of knowledge, we know knowledge is coming. Whenever we hang up a tapestry in the form of understanding, we know understanding is coming. We understand a lot of these things, and it is because of this culmination of the order and structure that comes with Freemasonry, and then the endowment of degree work, of proficiency, of memory dedication, of all of these things that we find in Freemasonry. Now you mix that with the proficiency and intelligibility of one who studies the teachings of Rosicrucianism for the metaphysical and esoteric aspect of it. You are dealing with a walking, talking life of abundance of information. Literally, it's just It's a beautiful experience. It's one of those things that it's hard to explain. There is not a conversation that you, as the individual mystic Mason, cannot involve yourself in. You will be proficient in language by the time you're done, because it takes a long time to get our degrees. It is not like, I've been to lodges where people done got degrees in one day. Same day degrees, same day raisins. Like, I seen that. I didn't get raised in the same day. It took me a minute to become a master in the Mystic Lodge. Being raised in a Nuwapian Grand Lodge, I mean, not a Nuwapian Grand Lodge, but being raised as a Nuwapian Mason, and then being raised as a AF and AM John G. Jones Mason, because we're still AF and AM, we just have French rights. That lodge that I was in, they got absorbed. They used to be called the Malachi, what was they? I forget, because I was with them for 6 months, and they got absorbed into PHA. So I went. They notified everybody what was taking place a long time before, almost 2 months before the absorption happened. So yeah, they was already saying that they was about to be absorbed into PHA and stuff like that, and I was saddened by that because I liked that lodge. That's why I joined it, because those brothers were very mystical and esoteric in they practices and the study and degree work and the conversations and lectures. Man, was beautiful. Always giving us something to do with the African origin of this or that. As Black Freemasons and Black men, that's very important to the development of our confidence and the development of our self-perception. So me seeing that, I wanted to be a part of that. And when they got absorbed, I was really upset, and I never wanted to not be a part of them brothers. But once they got absorbed, I wasn't with the absorption, and I moved around. I went somewhere else, and one of my homies that I was real close with, he ended up asking me about, Freemasonry, this and that, and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna end up, doing a demit, you feel me, trying to get into a new lodge, and he's like, all right, man, ooh, this and that, and he's like, well, when you cut back in, pull me in with you, man. He's like, because I don't want to go nowhere you ain't. And I was like, man, So I met like 4 other brothers, and these 4 brothers that I met, they were all obviously Master Masons, and we was just meeting all the time. And then one of our elders that was there, he was talking about how, this was like 4 years ago, he's talking about opening up, not opening, but petitioning, the Grand Lodge of Illinois for personal recognition, because he wanted to open a Grand Lodge. And he was like, we already meet. And then he was like, I got a lot of brothers who like are on board. He was like, so we'll have like 27 people in our lodge, in our Grand Lodge. He was like, we'll have enough to fill every officer position. And then he was like, I got all the work already, because he was already on a Sovereign Grand Council as a Shriner before. So he came in and he basically gave us the blueprint of how to start a Grand Lodge, how to start a Blue Lodge, etc. But me and the 4 other brothers that I was with, we were already into Rosicrucianism. And me being a Nuwapian Mason at that time, I was seeking more esoteric teachings. I wasn't trying to go to a lodge where I was just going to come in, show face, socialize, fraternize for a minute, obviously learn my degree work and do some Masonic things, do some Masonry stuff, and probably formulate a fundraiser or a charity, etc. And then I was going to go about my way. I didn't want that. I wanted to come to a place where every time I came there, I was in a submission position of student. And I wanted to always be in a place where I was constantly absorbing and learning knowledge and constantly learning information. So one of my friends, he was like, man, you should come with me to this Rosicrucian Lodge, He like, you're a Freemason. He was like, they welcome Freemasons all the time. He's like, actually, the brother who teaches there is whatever. Da, da, da. He ended up being an international Freemason from the International Free and Accepted Masons, which is a Christian organization. So I was like, all right, well, I was like, I guess I'll come, da da da, because I didn't really understand Rosicrucianism. Like I had heard a lot about it. Obviously, I had been studying it a lot, but the structure, because let me bring clarity to what I said. I was studying Rosicrucianism, but I didn't understand it as a structure because whatever manifestos and lectures I was studying, it never said that Rosicrucianism had a structure like Masonry. It was like there's no one person, there's no like blase. So you usually get Rosicrucian orders that form, right, by way of choosing a person who they like their interpretation, they like the way that they present information, they like the way they teach, like the Nuwapians. And then what you end up getting is a lot of transcribed or transmitted information through the interpretation of whatever the sacred scriptures they may be reading from the Bible, Quran, Torah, the Vedas, Gilgamesh epics, etc. Now you going through this and this person is giving you their interpretation. So this is how the Rosicrucians interpret that, how Albert Pike came with Morals and Dogma, which was already a form of literature in existence. You have to remember that. Basically, what Albert Pike did was revised it and rewrote the book for American usage. He himself didn't come up with a lot of the material there. It was really like one of those things where like you transcribe something from another language into English, because Albert Pike wasn't an idiot, and I know people don't like the fact that he was a racist slave owner, but hey, at the end of the day, you know, intelligence is in prejudice. So with that being said, regardless of how I may personally feel about his actions as a human, his information is very beneficial to the mind that is seeking the esoteric light. This is why he asked the question, makes the statement in Morals and Dogma about Lucifer being the light bearer and how these things are basically misinterpreted from a religious standpoint, because the religion blocks the esoteric mind, the mind's eye blocks that. It calcifies the pineal. So once that happens, you are looking in the religious aspect. So now you don't care about the esoteric. Now you don't care about the mystical life of Christ. You don't care about where he actually learned how to become so proficient in scripture. You don't care about that. You don't care about how the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam actually went to his wife Khadija's uncle Walaka, who was a Christian scribe, and he helped him understand that the angel Jibrail was the one who came and gave him that message. Now, in some aspects, people will say these things are political and these things were not divinely inspired, but then you could say the same thing about the structure and formulation of what we know today is modern day Judaism. And we can also say the same thing about the structure today that we know is modern day Mormonism and the Amish, etc. All these things are structures and orders that have existed in a way that it stops the believer from believing or seeking to connect all the greatness to what they believe to that. It stops them within the book. So if the book doesn't say it, it's not true. And that's one of the biggest issues when you're dealing with the religious mind. So what Rosicrucianism does, Rosicrucianism shows the individual seeker that the interpretation of the book is just that. Interpretation. The book can be interpreted in any form or fashion. Okay? There's literary context and then there's interpretive context, which deals with the esoteric interpretation of the literal scripture. So if you say something like eye for an eye or tooth for a tooth, or turn the other cheek, these things can be interpreted. Okay? Inna Nasuwallahi Qara'ibin, for surely the help of Allah is near. These things can be interpreted. When Abu Bakr in the hadith says that when the day of judgment is coming, that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam held together two fingers and told him, when is that day coming? And he held two fingers, that sign of fidelity, and that said is from here to here, that the time that he doesn't know, but that the time is from this finger to this finger, that it's that day. It's that short. And in esoteric philosophies, that can be interpreted as the day of judgment comes the day you die, which is the largest accepted interpretation of the esoteric realm. And then you have the literal interpretation of an actual Armageddon happening, where something comes out of the sky in a physical form and it judges mankind. So these things are very important when you're dealing with the understanding of what Francis Bacon and John Dee brought. Okay? So when you're dealing with Francis Bacon, you have to remember you're dealing with a French occultist. When you're dealing with John Dee, you have to remember you're dealing with a French occultist who passed the light to his predecessor, John Bacon, who then passed those same manuscripts and manifestos on to his students and sent a few of them here to America to establish or to assist their Masonic brothers in the establishment of this new world. Okay? Why do you think freedom of speech and freedom of expression, freedom of religion are things that are very strongly expressed here? Because the very foundation of this nation is so beautifully made Masonically. It is so beautifully crafted and grafted in a Masonic realm of thought. It is. It is beautifully crafted and grafted in a Rosicrucian realm of thought, which is an esoteric, non-judgmental, all-expressive thought to understand that which you call your creation. Your creator, and to understand its creation, which is you, and to understand that the same light that lighteth Jesus lighteth every man in the world, and the same breath that God took from himself to blow into the lungs of Adam to make him, right, a living soul, right, a shemesh hayin, or a ruhukudus, right? You dealing with these things in the realm of literary, and then on an esoteric realm, you could say, well, God blew into the breath of my descendant, which is Adam, right? Now, if I'm a descendant of Adam, and this is not literal, this is just allegorical. If I am a descendant of Adam, and Adam is a descendant or the first creation of God, which would make him actually the first son of God, because he literally created him from the dust of the ground and blew his own breath into him. It was a completely different process than what he did with Yeshua HaMashiach or Isa ben Miriam or Isos Christos or Jesus Christ. These things can also be interpreted that way. So once we start to understand that the interpretation lies on the reader, and that your imam, your rabboni, your preacher is giving you their interpretation, only then will you be free from the dogma that comes with religious thought. Yeshua HaMashiach challenged the Pharisees on their religious dogma, right? The Prophet Muhammad Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam challenged many different believers on their faith. When you're talking about Zoroaster, the Persians, we can keep going. When you talk about Confucius, when you talk about anybody, Tegwa, when you talk about, oh my God, I don't even want to get started on the African aspect of it, but because that'll take too long. But at the end of the day, all of these things can be interpreted. The interpretation falls on you as the reader. This is why you have a guide. This is why you have a teacher. This is why you have ulemas. This is why you have sheikhs and rabbis and rabbonis. You follow in kohans. You follow, so you can sit here and you can learn Torah. You can learn Tanakh. You can learn Talmud. You can learn the Sabah. You follow? The Zohar. You can learn the Quran. You can learn Sunnah. You can learn Hadith. You can learn Tafsir. You follow? You can learn a plethora of things religiously, right? For you as the individual to understand other human beings' interpretation of the Creator. And in understanding that gematria, you can understand the sacred geometry forms that have solidified in humans, right? Because we are nothing more than light personified. So once we personify as light, our sacred geometrical form chooses this body. And this sacred geometrical form is one of the purest expressions of the Creator. That's why we have been blessed in this form and not in a lower form. We've not been put into a lower state of primordiality. We have to understand that. I personally interpret my life as a higher step up from a life that I may have lived. Okay? As this same person. And I believe every experience that I have in this new life that I am living as the same person, when I transition, I go higher or I go lower, depending on where my mind state is at when I transition. That is just one interpretation. Okay? This is why a lot of Muslims, they say La ilaha, right? Alif Lam Ha, or Ashadu alla ilaha. You follow? These things are said during the moments of death so they can be welcomed into Al-Jannah. They can go to heaven. You follow? So for this certain degree of information, you have the Jews who also have their own little chants and prayers that they say before death and during states where they feel like when they're about to transition, so they can also be welcomed into, you know what I'm saying, the kingdom of heaven, though. You feel me? Because now they're going to Darth or Darth Vader. You follow? They're gone. And they're going on the other side. Okay? And they're about to see the face of the Creator, who they call Yad He Vahid, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Or Yahuwah, or Khilun, or Ra'inna, or Ra, or Usir, or Heru, right? All of these principles are nothing more than the many expressions of the one. The oneness of the Creator is seen through all things that we do. This is why I agree with the Christians to a degree, because I know where they're getting it from when they say you can't do nothing without God, because Yeshua HaMashiach said, I do nothing of my own, only of the will of the one who sent me. He's tapping into a higher frequency in order for him to be able to perform these miracles on this third dimensional physical plane of existence called Earth. So we have what we are called, as humans, we are called terrestrial beings. This is why in our symbiology, we have the terrestrial and celestial, okay? And as Dr. Phil Valentine will say, us as higher intellectual beings are what we will call alpha terrestrials, okay? So I understand that the interpretation of all things lies on the individual. This is why it's important to have guidance, tutelage, and leadership when you are trying to interpret high degrees of college level information. That's why they call the Rosicrucian degrees and up college degrees. Some would debate that they call all the higher degrees of Freemasonry, once you pass master and up, that those are all college degrees. Okay, so there's a certain amount of dedication that the individual has to have in order to go on this personal journey to decipher the universe. You have to understand it. Squaring your actions is one thing, but how will you understand the life that you are manifested in this physical plane? How will you understand it if you do not have anything to reference it to outside of what you've been given as your belief? This is why Freemasonry established such a beautiful country called America, because in establishing this beautiful country, we are then able to take the same principles, the same morals from Freemasonry, from Rosicrucianism, and incorporate them into the very fabric of our society and tell people, I have the right to learn, I have the right to know, I have the right to be informed, okay? I have the right for all of these things to come to me because I have earned them duly, rightly, and justly. I have come, right, lost, right? And I was in the rubble or in the trash pile, and when I came out, I had this spider on me, right? Now, understanding how I got that spider on me and understanding what that spider is, you follow? It changed my perspective as I started to do my degree work. It changed my perspective of Freemasonry once I came into Freemasonry and I understand when no homosexuality going on, when nobody asking me to sacrifice no family members, none of this extra BS that people that are anti-Masonic, that are on the outside looking in, trying to tell you goes on. And then people be like, oh, you're not high enough. You're not this, you're not that. I'm a mystic Freemason, bro. Like I said, we have 9 Rosicrucian degrees. Anybody who's ever studied Rosicrucianism knows that the degrees of Rosicrucianism alone will cover every basis of theosophy, psychology, anthrobiology. It don't matter. It will cover it all. Literally, from linguistics to cosmobiology to neuroscience to everything. Rosicrucianism engulfs it all. And it gives you biblical, Quranic, Torah, or whatever sacred text you may be using. It gives you the reference there as a formulation for the interpretation for you as the modern reader to understand it from the realm that you may be familiar with. So if you are Hindi and you coming into a lot of Hindu culture, and then you trying to step into the Western mysticism, and then you start recognizing certain Hindu culture aspects, that's because Rosicrucianism doesn't put prejudice or blinders onto information. It doesn't. And it accepts all forms of information from all races and genders. So this is why more people you see flock towards the modern Rosicrucian orders as opposed to like the OTO or like Wiccan or like all of these other degree works or organizations that use the term so mote be. Okay, all of these things, these people claim to be mystics as well, and they claim to share a certain correlation and foundation with Freemasonry. And for me personally, from my studies and what I've learned, a lot of those people share more of a common foundation with Rosicrucianism than they do with Freemasonry. A lot of people that they're saying founded these organizations that were Freemasons were actually not Freemasons, they were Rosicrucians. And because a lot of Rosicrucians interweaved into Freemasonry, hence you get to that 18th degree and you got the Knights Order, the Rose and Cross. You follow? Which opens your mind to a certain amount of undogmatic, unjudgmental, unbiased, perceptive information and knowledge that will help you better yourself and understand the world that you are in. Literally. So, mystic Freemasonry is nothing more than a conglomeration of modern Freemasonry from 1717, United Grand Lodge of England, and Francis Bacon's understanding of John Dee's Rosicrucianism, and then his students came here and they spread. So again, us in particular, we honor Dr. Pasquale Beverly Randolph, Dr. Phil Valentine, Dr. Francis Cress Wilson. You follow? We honor a few other non-black scholars as well, but because our lodge is founded by African American, man, he's obviously going to want us to know a lot about African American history and our contributions to Freemasonry, our contributions to the Rosicrucian order, and our contributions to Shrinery, our contributions to the Order of the Eastern Star, the Daughters of Isis, etc., the Daughters of the Sphinx, all of that. He wanted us to know those things. So for us coming in, we had to understand the importance of our white counterparts, understanding the importance of Celtic and Nordic history, understanding the importance of European mythology, understanding that a lot of the references that you get from certain things, you don't always have to put them in one type of context. You can spread them out. So coming into an organization like this and being a part of a fraternity like this has helped me not only come into the true knowledge of self as a black American, but it's helped my white brothers and my Hispanic counterparts, right, to look at other cultures and understand their greatness and their divinity without demonizing them in the same breath. It shows blacks in their greatness without demonizing Europeans. It shows Europeans in their greatness without demonizing blacks and Hispanics and Native Americans. Okay, so that's a good thing. And then the Hispanics are shown in their greatness without demonizing blacks and whites. Okay, and etc. So these things are important. Once you start to come in and understand that these things is necessary for the actual development of human consciousness, you have to face these things. You have to face these issues in the mystic lodge, because you can't be sitting up there saying, oh yeah, this is my brother and da 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 da. No, you're gonna have to do some connection work. You're gonna have to do some energy work. Me and you might have to be real close to each other to figure out some of this stuff. And you're going to have to be comfortable with me as a black man being in your personal space as a white man, or you cannot be a part of this here thing we got. Ain't no phony kicking it in this lodge. Ain't no faking the funk. You have to be genuine in the heart. This is why the rose is representative of the heart. This is just one interpretation. The rose is representative of the heart, and that heart blossoms and it emits that the green light from the vine, which is the root or the umbilical cord to the source of the creator. And you know that once that rose blossoms or blooms, you know, if I love the rose, I won't pick it. I'll admire it as a rose in its state. And that's what happens when you come here. You don't come into the realm of this knowledge and then you just look at a person and you say, oh, you white, I can't, deal with you. Oh, you black, I can't deal with you. No, you're going to have to deal with me because we American. And we base our country's greatness off the ability to coexist and comprehend other people's identity, culture, religion, and perspective interpretations on those things. We can give it our own interpretation all we want, but how does the people who actually develop this thing look at it? That's just as important. This is why for a long time I never took advice about African culture from white people, because I knew that somewhere down the line I was going to run into a white academic scholar who had higher credentials than the one who was in favor of non-discriminatory practices, and he was going to push his agenda, or she was going to push her agenda, like Margaret Sanger, you follow, to make this thing about race. And that's why there's such a divide today in the mainstream lodges, because if you're not mainstream, you're not a Mason. If you're not recognized by the mainstream lodge, which if you go into any of the mainstream lodges, a large majority of mainstream lodges are 80% white, due to the fact that mainstream lodges practice racism. They practice segregation. If you are black and you go to a mainstream lodge, they do what's called send you up the street. They, in a nice way, they say they are offering you your birthright. Meaning you should go learn Freemasonry from your people first. And if it ain't sufficient enough, then you can come to us. That's the nice way of saying it. But basically they're telling you, well, we've never had a Negro here. You might want to go up the street. But because we live in such a politically correct society today, people are fearful and they're afraid to admit that that's just what it is. And some brothers are Masons. Some brothers are sitting in high positions: Most Worshipful Master, Supreme Grand Council, Grand Master, Sovereign Grand Commander, etc. And they are just as racist as the day is long, or prejudice. Let me put it that way: prejudice. Because racism is prejudice plus the power on the economic, political, and social level. A lot of these guys don't got that power, but what they do is they take the little power they do have and they execute extreme prejudice against blacks, Hispanics, etc. And then people wonder why all these clandestine lodges be popping up, because there's like a unwillingness to accept anything different. It's challenging the natural fabric of what it looks like in here. So I don't want him in here. That's stupid. That's dumb. That's why people don't progress in a culture, in a society that's supposed to be multicultural. In a society that prides itself on being united under one ideological concept of thought and under one flag. Okay? If we are all Americans, why can't my black American ass, excuse my language, come to your white American ass lodge, excuse my language, without being treated as if I am less than you? Now, mind you, you have some lodges where there are white brothers. You got some lodges where there's even Asian brothers, because Asians, they pretty much don't bother nobody. They kind of stick and practice culture to themselves. That's why they're so homogenous, like the Swedes. So when you looking at homogenous societies or people who share homogenous ideology, they think it's okay for everything to look exactly the same and never change, because they are standing off that based off the written literatures of Freemasonry. And certain people are like, well, there's no compromisation. You don't have to. There's no innovation. We're not here to bring innovation to this most sacred craft. It's the way it is, how it's always been, and it's gonna be that way. Got a lot of people that's like that. And you got brothers be like, well, my lodge ain't ever had no niggers in it and ain't gonna have no niggers in it. And then you got black lodges that be like, well, we will let some white boys in here, but they don't let us in their lodge. That's always the excuse for black dudes. They don't really care who come in their lodge. They don't. Unless they are a supremacist group or a black nationalist group that emphasizes the importance of black unity amongst black men and women, and they don't feel like people from the outside can contribute anything. That's one interpretation. So I say all this to say that Rosicrucianism is a very effective, very beautiful craft of thought, and it teaches a lot, and it eliminates prejudice, or at least it tries to. And it's effective in doing it because it doesn't restrict membership by race and gender in the door. So this is why some of the greatest speakers that you'll hear for black esoteric occultism come out of the schools of Rosicrucianism. They come out of the schools of theosophy. They come out of the schools of these Eastern rooted thought-based systems. That's what they come out of. So again, Rosicrucianism is not Freemasonry, but Rosicrucianism is arguably a older. It's not even arguably. That's just known. Rosicrucianism has been in France before the Grand Lodge of England was even formed. Now, Masonry has always existed in some form, so that's not even debatable. But if you're talking about modern Masonry as we know it today, yeah, Rosicrucian is way older than that. The modern Rosicrucian lodge that they got, the modern order of Rosicrucianism, didn't start till like 1909. So by default, Freemasonry as a structure is older. Modern Freemasonry as a structure is older.